everyone. So welcome to the CAS podcast on this beautiful Sunday. I am actually here with a complete legend of the game. I'm here with none other than George Foster, one of the best scouts in the UK, according to the likes of Graham Rix and Glenn Hoddle. And when you look at where the scouting is kind of going, and the whole England DNA, what are your thoughts on the England DNA and in terms of how scouting has changed in the UK? What ways do you think it's improved? What do you think of where recruitment is right now in the UK and how scouts think?
Well, I think, Nick, that, my experience of it now is, I say, a lot of it's analytical now. A lot of it's stats driven. So you have the younger element now of recruitment that don't think that they need the experienced eye anymore. They think that they can find the players on their tools, on their systems, and the experienced scouts think that can't be done, and it's all about the eye. But actually, Nick, it needs each other.
Absolutely,
it needs each other.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the analytical side should drive the experience. I think the experience should drive the analytical side. So, for example, I think that if I go to watch a player abroad or in England, watch him live, I then go to the analytical team and say, right, let's get all the stats on him. Let's have a look at his past games. Let's see if what I've seen you can marry up.
Right.
So then you then got a better idea then of what the player is. What the analytical side doesn't give you, Nick, is the type of person he is. You can't see on a DVD what type of person he is. You can if you see them live, as you know. If you're watching a live game, you can see the players with good attitudes. You can see the players that are probably a little bit short on attitude. You can see what they do off the ball. You can't see that on laptops, on computers. What's their movement? What's their attitude like? What do they do when the ball's in transition, when the ball's down the other side? What are they clever? What are they looking to pull in other areas? As defenders, when the team's attacking, are they looking at positions to be taken up in case, the ball, they lose possession and come on to the counter attack? All those things you need to do live.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you're looking then, when you looked at, like, for example, so I know, I think Graham Rix, Graham had actually spoken with you about the young lad that's at Reading, Andy Rinomhota. Mm-hmm. So obviously you'd had Andy Rinomhota. When you first seen Andy Rinomhota, and obviously as we know, I spoke to Stella and I actually asked them about Andy Rinomhota, and you know what they told me? They think he's going to go for over 25 million. He's going to go for a lot of money, and he's a player that Graham Rix recommended you. He recommended you to, and what do you think he had when you first seen him? And obviously when Graham spoken to you and you guys have worked together, did Graham Rix have a lot of respect for the scouting side of it? Because he's not a scout, he's a coach. He's obviously a head of coaching.
Yeah. Well, Graham has done the scouting role as well, because when I was at Wolves, I didn't know Graham, but Glenn said, listen, Graham Rix is down in that area and, he's got lots of experience, let's use him, which I did. So Graham actually worked for us at Wolves.
Okay.
So he did have some experience with scouting. But Nick, Graham Rix has played for Arsenal. He's played for England in World Cups. And he rings me and says, I've got a young player at Portchester. I think he's got something. Will you come down? What do I say then? Well, no, Greg, because I don't think you would really have an eye for a player. You've only played for Arsenal, England, World Cups.
You can't really say no.
Finals,
Can't really say no.
Oh,
you can't really say no.
you know,
And especially, you know, it's funny. We did an interview with Graham, and we spoke about the bad foot club he used to run at Chelsea, and he brings Gianfranco Zola and Vialli and a lot of the continental lads, Marcel Desailly. You know, they all took a really big interest in it, and so he's probably saying, you got to come down. I don't have him in the bad foot club yet. You know,
yeah.
that's interesting.
Nick, I'm looking at him in the game, and it wasn't the best quality. And if I remember, I think it was the weather wasn't the best on the day. But I could see what Graham saw in him. I could see that. And then of course I took him to Swansea for a week in the academy because he was at that age group, and in their wisdom, they said that they didn't think that he was of the quality that Swansea were looking for.
Did you disagree with that? Did you disagree with that decision? Why did you disagree, would you say?
I think, Nick, that sometimes, not everywhere, but sometimes the coaches at academy level are very protective towards their own. And, sometimes they won't let outsiders in. Also as well, Nick, that, if I was a developer of footballers, i.e. a coach developer, I would look at his potential, not where he is now, but where he could be if I got the work in him and he responded to my coaching.
Right.
I'm not saying I was a great coach or anything, but they're tending to want them to be players then, and they're not. They're just potential.
Right.
Like Jordan Hugo. God, Nick was so raw, but there was potential there for good coaching to make him a player, and that's what Andy was. He had the potential, and I don't know whether they made the decision on him as he was then instead of what he could have been.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember speaking to Andrei Kanchelskis, and I asked him. I said, where do the top agents in England, when they looked at Andy Rinomhota, because they always keep an eye on the players, and I know England would be looking at him simply because he's still. I think what age is he now? I think he's about 20, 21. So, but he said to me, England would be looking at a player like him, but if you look at his ability, he says that. I think he told me that they definitely viewed him at Stella. They viewed him as like a lower, like a pretty much a mid-table Premier League club. They view him at that level and possibly higher, depending on how he progresses. But if you've got a player like that who came from nowhere and he just needed that platform, and I suppose that's what we do at CAS, is that we want to provide a platform for the young players. You know what I mean, to progress in the game, because they need a lot more help now. Because I think football is tougher now. It's more demanding. I think the financial rewards are higher, they're greater. So even as a scout, there's a lot more pressure to produce, because clubs they need that next best player. You know what I mean? They don't want potential as much now, and so that's why you see, I suppose, not as many good coaches around the game, because you know what I mean. They just want that player that's ready and players that can go in and run the session. But if you look in your experience, George. And you look at, for example, so Andy, obviously, Swansea didn't take him. What happened then? So obviously, then he ended up going to Reading, didn't he? He ended up going to Reading instead.
Well, he went back to Portchester with Graham.
Right.
And then Graham obviously knew Steve Clark.
Right.
From his time at Chelsea.
Right.
The manager, he was manager at Reading then.
Right.
So Graham rang Steve, said, look, which he said to me, I've got a player here, and I think that the boy's got potential.
Right.
Can be a player.
Right.
He goes to Reading within a day, I think, within a day or 2 days of training, they've got him signed up at Reading.
Right.
So they obviously, Steve Clark saw something in him that I saw in him, that Graham seen in him, that they didn't see in him at Swansea.
Right. Right. And so when you looked at that, And are you surprised that he won Player of the Year at Reading? Are you surprised at that or no?
Do you know, Nick, when you think that he's gone from Portchester to the Player of the Year at Reading, a championship club,
right,
and in a relatively short period of time, you know, when you're talking about how far can he go, look at what he's done already. So he's passed all those barriers. You know, could he play in the under-23s at Reading? Did that? Can he play in the first team in the championship? Done that. Player of the Year. How much further could he go?
Right.
You know,
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, people can say, well, he's a mid you know, Premier League player, but when he was at Portchester, if you said he was going to be a championship player, you'd probably go, oh, that's a little bit ambitious.
Right.
Now,
it's interesting though, is that when people, but also as well, I mean, you think about at Swansea, did any of the players that were in the Swansea under-18s, did any of them ever progress to Swansea City's first team?
I think 2 or 3 of them have, Nick.
Yep.
Yeah, I think they have.
Would you say they've had the impact that Andy Rinomhota's had?
Probably not.
That's interesting, isn't it? Like when you think about that, yeah, it's a good thought to have. And then so obviously as you look at all your other experience, obviously you also worked with Cardiff City, and that position there, and obviously you've held so many great positions. Work with other people like Nicky Barmby and a lot of great whose son I think was Jack Barmby, who was at Manchester United. He was there.
Yeah.
And so then obviously you're doing a lot of stuff with Southampton at the minute. You work with Southampton, is that correct?
Yes, I work for the academy. Consultancy work for the academy, yeah.
And how are you finding that role?
I enjoy it, Nick. It's, you know, they're good people. You know, they're good people at Southampton. It's a well-run club. You know, I respect the work that they do there. You know, my line manager at Southampton is terrific. You know, the head of recruitment, you know, he's got his finger on the pulse there.
Right.
At Southampton. And it's a pleasure to be a part of that team, although it's on a part-time basis.
Yeah.
You know, they still make you feel part of things, you know.
So would you say compared to that role and I mean, as you look at the job that's at Southampton, would you say that Southampton, because they obviously had the likes of Gareth Bale, they've had Luke Shaw, I mean, they've had some really smashing players come through there, and it's funny because I suppose like one of the clubs that we're trying to take over at the minute, who used to actually be at Southampton, which I find quite interesting. So, and you can see when I've watched him, you can see the glimpses of what makes him a very good footballer. You know, you can see the dynamic of a really good player, even though he's not there anymore. But when you look at a lot of the kids that are coming through at Southampton, how many do you think that you're looking at right now and you think, right, he could be a star of the future?
Well, Nick, I've watched, because of the virus and the things shut down, we're still doing at Southampton, we're still doing like video work, and part of that is to have a look at our own players, because you know we can be off here, there, and everywhere making judgments on players and not knowing what we've actually got in our own football club. So they've done well, and it's clever thinking. They're utilising the time on us watching videos of our own players.
Right.
Now, I've watched our under-15 team play against Chelsea in the under-15 Junior Floodlit Cup and beat them on penalties after a 2-2 game after extra time.
Right.
I've seen 1 or 2 players in there, Nick, that I'm quite excited about.
Right.
You know, I've only seen them in 1 game. That's all, against Chelsea. But in that 1 game, I've seen what I think are 2 or 3 exciting players that, you know, with the right work, with the right coaching, with a little bit of luck, with a good attitude could go on eventually in playing Southampton's first team.
Right. Okay. You think possibly England internationals, future England internationals? What do you think?
You never know, Nick, do you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we're talking about under 15s here.
Yeah.
We're talking about 15-year-old boys.
Yeah.
But, you know, and you know as well as I do that, you know, even at under 15s, they're being judged. 15-year-olds are being judged for the future.
Absolutely.
You know,
yep.
and you know now the academies are going down to, you know, 7-8-year-olds in the academy system.
Absolutely.
They're looking to develop. And with the final crisis now in our game because of this horrendous virus, you know, it might be now where clubs are going to have to go back and start producing more because they do produce more of their own players, their homegrown players.
Right. And so, I mean, in terms of, as you think about, I know that from being around, I think it's definitely being out in continental Europe, I've seen it's a more development friendly model. But I think at the same time, I think it's harsh on British football, and I think British football has taken a battering over this last 20 years. Do you know what I mean? In a lot of ways, and whether you're coming from Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland's not part of Britain, but the Republic of Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and you're seeing a lot of these lads coming in from continental Europe, you know, and they're literally taken. So it's going to be interesting with this pandemic. And I think also with Brexit, I think, is maybe going to produce better players down the road, simply because the kids from abroad can't come in. Literally, they can't come in. So do you think that's going to have a good effect on British clubs wanting to work more with non-league clubs and clubs like that they can create good partnerships with, where you think that should be where a club like Southampton should really be looking long term?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that certainly with this horrendous virus that we've got, if I was heading up a department at a Premier League Championship club, youth department, I would now be making plans to make us the best there is in the UK.
Right.
You know, obviously, you know, the European side of things you need to be covered, but I would be putting all my thoughts and all my plans and all my work into making us the best there is in the UK at finding UK talent, which comes into your Cat 2, your Cat 3s, your non-league, your youth football, your grassroots, you know, to find the talent there. Because, Nick, we talk about the art of recruitment is finding the talent before it arrives in the first team of someone's football club.
Absolutely.
Because as soon as you play in somebody's first team, and Exeter are brilliant at it, when they've got young players coming through, they expose them to first team football, even if they sit them on the bench and bring them on for the last 5 minutes of games that they've won, and they generate the interest, and then the big clubs are like sharks swimming around.
Well, you know, it's interesting. The fact that you're talking about Exeter, obviously they've obviously had what do you call that? Well, Ethan Ampadu. He came from Exeter. Now it's interesting. I know there's a coach there, and we're supposed to have him on here, but he works within the English setup now. Lee Skirm. We're hopefully going to have him on the CAS podcast here, and just talking about his experience as a coach. But they also seem to have a lot of good coaches as well. So I'm assuming that's why the kids are becoming what they're becoming. And Ethan Ampadu, he's at RB Leipzig right now on loan from Chelsea. So it just shows you don't always need to be at a big club times, and where you're looking at the potential. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. No,
exactly. But the art of it, Nick, was to find him before he got into Exeter's first team.
Right.
You know, that's the art of it. You know, is to find him early, get him in your system. before, because as soon as he got into Exeter's first team, then it's an all, everyone knows about him, don't they?
Yeah,
You
they
know,
do. Absolutely. That's
and
exactly
and
what.
I've got to say, by the way, he is one of the best young talents I've seen.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
he's looking good. But well, Chelsea have got such a nucleus, don't they? Of good young players in there, in and around their first team, you know. So I mean, in terms of, I know, obviously at CAS, that's one of the things that we're always wanting to educate a lot of young players, letting them know what things they need to be doing. So if you were to give like your top ten tips in terms of to an academy player and to a player that's not been through the academy system yet, which sometimes is actually better. What would your top 10 tips be to an aspiring academy player to get scouted? You know what I mean? Whether it be by coming to CAS himself or going somewhere else. And then what would your top 10 tips be to a player that hasn't been through the system and wants to get a contract somewhere? What would be your, or just make it five,
gosh,
five of each. What would you
gosh,
say?
Nick. I would see the sometimes young players, Nick, I think are better off staying where they are rather than going to the bigger club and maybe being lost in the system.
Right,
You know, because there's no doubt about it. If there's a pathway for them,
right,
you know, through the different age groups, being pushed early through the different age groups, being pushed into the under 16s, under 18s early, being then pushed, having a pathway into the first team, they will develop quicker than being in a big academy somewhere and not having those chances to progress quicker. You
right,
know, for those that are not in that system now, my advice to them would be never give up hope.
right. Yeah,
Never give up. Sometimes you feel sorry for yourself. Sometimes you get frustrated. Never give up hope. If you believe that you have the ability to play, to be a professional footballer, and that's your dream, then you follow that dream through until you absolutely know that you have no chance
yep,
of achieving that.
yep. And what are some of the tips that you've given to players? Like, obviously, I know you spoke about that kid, he came from Poland and it just didn't work out for him at Wolves. And I know that's life sometimes. Things just don't work out sometimes. But what would you say, like, in terms of to lads that are obviously trying to, do you think sometimes you can try too hard and it just doesn't work for you?
Yeah, sometimes, Nick, I don't think that you can ever try too hard.
Mm.
You know, I think sometimes in situations things don't work out for whatever reason. You
Right,
know, and I'm not a big believer in it, a huge believer, but I do think that somewhere along the line, Nick, of your career, you do need a little bit of luck.
right. And
I
so,
had mine. I had mine. I had mine from a physiotherapist who said, "Give him a chance." That was my little bit of luck.
wow. Okay.
You
And
know.
so even all the other players that have been through your hands throughout the years as a chief scout, you know what I mean, working at the highest level. And I think that it's kind of seeing that if players kind of look hard enough, but also as well, I think they have to be doing the right things, don't they, as well? Because if they're not doing the right things, George, they have to give you a reason to believe in them. But if you're looking at a player, what are the things that you would say if a player does these things? I'm going to stop looking at this player for this reason. What would you say those 5 reasons would be?
I think the big one for me is attitude, Nick.
Right,
You
right,
know, it's the character. It's the
right,
character. You know, now maybe at a younger age group, you know, when they're mentally developing, you know, a lot of it you can change. Sometimes it's immaturity. It's immature. Sometimes the body language, shaking heads, you know,
right. Okay.
it looks bad, but you know, it's immaturity. They're only young.
Mm,
Now, as they progress and get older, and they've still got what we would class as a bad character, then
Right.
for me, I'm not saying that it's 100%, but most of the time, Nick, that's the character that stays with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, it's so funny. See, when you talk about, like, I remember this one player, and I recommended him to a club. You know, I just wanted to help this kid out, right? And he had scored 12 games and 13 youth internationals for Northern Ireland, right? And this player, right? I'm not going to name him, but basically, I recommend to FC Groningen in the Eredivisie, you know, and he's there with a player who I really rated. His name is Ijdin Hrustic. He's doing very, very well. One of the best number 10s in the Dutch Premier League, you know, right now. We'll probably get a move to the Premier League this summer, probably more than likely. And one of the things that I remember when I was speaking to Ijdin, and he turned around, and Ijdin, he had come from Schalke, but he couldn't get into Schalke's first team because of I think it was Julian Drexler was in front of him, you know, at that time. And it's funny because when you speak to Ijdin, he's like, he doesn't have bad physiology. And Peter Hoekstra, who when you were at Stoke, you would remember Peter Hoekstra. Remember the
Yes.
little winger? And he turns
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
and Peter would be like, he'd be like every time, and he'd say, if you get the ball, just give it to Ijdin. Because you had Ijdin, and then you had the Dutch centre half, who was the captain of, I think it was the Dutch under-17. He had just won the European Championships, and so he said, just give the ball to Ijdin. So Ijdin's like, okay, and he gets the ball, and then whenever I remember speaking with Ijdin, and he already had Adidas contract, and now he's moving to Nike, and so he's doing all of these things, but he's not distracted. And I remember speaking, and it's interesting when you see how aware someone is, just how aware they are of who they are as a person, who they are as a player. And you know the thing that blew my mind, he said he said to me, I'm the best. Nobody's better than me. Do you know what I mean? I'm the main man, you know, I'll make things happen, you know, just give me the ball, I'll make it happen. You know what I mean? And he said, yeah, they value me at 8 million, but I personally think I'm worth at the minute 25 million. So
Yeah,
he
well,
and but it wasn't, and he said, and I looked at him, and I thought, and he said, see, you think that's arrogant, don't you? He said, that's confidence.
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah,
when you see that in a player, and you're looking at a player from a scouting in terms of attitude, you think, wow, I like that attitude right there. But there's some players, they would never think to say something like that. So it shows you how players are wired versus the other player
yeah.
I sent there, who had been a youth international, and he was coming from Northern Ireland, not as far away. And then you look at this kid, Ijdin Hrustic, he's come from Australia. He's the son of two immigrants, and he's highly motivated. And he's already, this other kid isn't as motivated, and he's trying to get to where this kid Ijdin Hrustic is. But now you see he's a star because he's done the necessary. Obviously, he's only 23, but he's got a long way to go. But I just find it interesting, and it's interesting because I was looking at a picture of him recently, and it's him running past David Neres of Ajax, you know what I mean? And I just,
Yes.
it makes you really proud, you know, when you see that. But like I say, there's keys to success, and follow the recipe, and you'll be successful. So, but
Yeah.
but it's been really great speaking with you, George. I think I've really learned a lot, and George will be involved with CAS, so he'll be scouting a lot of players. Like I say, George, we appreciate your experience. We think that what players can learn from you, and some of the feedback you can give a player is just, it's extremely valuable, you know. And I'm glad to have you on our team, you know, because I think that
Thank you.
you're such a great ambassador for the football industry, but as a person as well. I think the things that you bring to the personality and the things you'll tell a player. A lot of people are afraid to be honest with players sometimes, but parents, players, agents, they need that honesty from people like yourself, you know. So yeah, absolutely. So anybody's any comments, don't just leave them in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe. And thank you for joining us on CAS TV.
Thank you, Nick.
All right.